Hello, my noble band of outlaws. Outlaw Samurai coming at you live with a video. Excuse the poor quality. I'm using my laptop so that I can utilize the filming equipment. It only seems to work with my laptop. Now, as we can see, the sword on today's cutting video is the cutting video for the 1796 light cavalry saber from Cold Steel. And as you can see, I have jerry-rigged a proper saber rigging as a sword. Now, there's something you may or may not notice, but I have Sharpie marks on the blade. These are to indicate where the sharp edge begins, so that I can fairly and accurately perform cuts with the factory edge. Also, quick little note, Cold Steel actually did the classic metal chape fairly good, because it doesn't really scrape the tip as you draw it out if you draw it out correctly. So what you'll do is basically just align the tip in, and then once it gets past the false edge, you can just kind of push against the spine like you would a katana, and it will sheath just fine, and you just have to pull it out flat. But enough with the niceties. Now, as we can no doubt deduce, I'm actually going to change my setup because I don't really like the cutting on the hill thing. I don't feel as if it will give very accurate representation. That's much better. Much, much better. Now, astute viewers of the comment section will no doubt note that when I was speaking with Gargoyle Blades, he said to do a comparison between the katana and this saber. Well, I am going to do a comparison, just not with a katana. What I'm going to be doing the comparison with is actually a blade much more similar in profile to the saber, that being the Kriegsmesser. As we can see, they have similar blade profiles in terms of thickness and width. So comparing the cutting ability of the Kriegsmesser to the cutting ability of the saber is a much fair comparison. There is, in fact, one caveat I should mention before we begin this test. The Kriegsmesser has been sharpened by me on the work sharp, so it is somewhat razor edged. This still has its factory edge because I haven't done the official cutting video for it yet. I don't sharpen my blades until after I do the official cutting video, unless I'm doing a double-edged sword, which then I can leave one edge blunt and the other edge sharp. So, to actually give a comparison between the two first, we'll start with the Kriegsmesser, just to give you an idea of how deadly this kind of blade profile can be. 3, 2, 1. And I know what you were going to say, Outlaw, you're using a two-handed sword to compare to a one-handed sword. And yes, but this is the only blade I have with a profile similar to the saber. And as you saw with my second cut, it still sliced through. With proper edge alignment, which that last one arguably did not have, okay, making sure no water got on this laptop. I really should have brought a rag out with me. But with proper edge alignment, one hand, two hand, it really doesn't matter too much. We're comparing basically a Granny Smith apple to a Fuji apple. They're apples to apples in terms of their shape, but it's like the difference between a Granny Smith and a Fuji. Now we saw the potential of the Kriegsmesser with the work sharp edge, basically. So I don't have to go as far each time to get the targets. Move the outlaw wagon closer. Now I will say this, I can't do false edge cuts with the Kriegsmesser because it doesn't have a false edge. But it does have a profile that if I was to take the notion of, I could very easily, with maybe an hour's worth of grinding on the work sharp, put a false edge on the back of it. So I will also be doing a false edge cut with this saber as well. But first, this Sharpie mark is it's very different, I have to say. Like, my measure is different. And for those of you who don't do sword fighting and just cut for fun, measure is basically the distance between you, your opponent, and the blade. Basically, measure starts from, I believe, your shoulder to the tip of your weapon. And keeping measure is very important in sword fighting and even sword cutting. Getting your distance right. And this, we've seen me do one-handed sword cuts before, but it was always with a two-handed sword that I was just using one-handed. So the distance is off. It feels off to me for some reason. 3, 2, 1. That was quite effortless. Like, I'm extending my arms so much more than I'm used to doing. And that's because my two-handed swords have longer blades that I can stay a further distance away from what I'm cutting. So this is truly a new beast for me to tame. That I might actually have to get closer than what I normally would to feel comfortable cutting. We will see. I would be amiss if I did not also attempt a false edge cut. Now this false edge cut will not be very traditional, because normally false edge cuts with sabers are done uh, either by pushing to like the back of the neck, or why am I shouting? I have my microphone on. I forgot I had my microphone on for a second, so sorry if the audio is a little loud. But it's done by pushing to the back of the neck, or basically a kun pao. But I'm just going to flip the blade around and see how well this works. Make sure. 3, 2, 1. Holy shit, that worked a lot better than I actually thought it would. As we can see, the false edge is not long enough to really cut these gallon jugs in half, but it is long enough to deliver a very powerful cut. I honestly want to say that the false edge is just a tad sharper than the main. All in all, not bad. And it's just the weight of this sword. It's not necessarily a heavy sword, but the weight on this particular one is just so far back at the hand. I mean, if we look at the point of balance, that's roughly about 6.5 inches from the crossguard. And I mean this part of the sword, not the knuckle bow or the little swept piece. But it's weird. Like, it feels like when I'm just holding it, yes, it does feel a tad blade present, but also I feel the weight in my hand. Like, I feel a lot of the mass is closer to the hand, but also closer to the blade. And it's a weird sensation. It's not like my two-handed swords, or even the Viking sword. I don't know. It's just a new sensation, I suppose. I have to admit, I honestly did not think that would stand so well. Victory sip. Yeah, I'm going to cut over. I'm actually going to see if I can't get another one of those cuts. Oh, damn! Something I'm noticing with this saber is you really feel when it hits something. And what I mean by that is you feel the moment it makes contact with the target. Like, I feel its resistance a little bit, that it's actually pushing the saber back before it eventually just pops through. And this saber blade is sharp. I don't feel like I'd have to go through the 80 grit all the way up. I feel like a couple of passes with the red belt and then a few swipes with the 6000 grit will really bring both of these edges to their apex. But at the moment, it very much feels like I'm hitting a lot of resistance in these horizontal cuts. Like, I feel the resistance more than when I'm cutting with my other swords. There's a lot to unpack with the saber. And it may just simply be the fact that I'm not used to single-handed curved swords or really using one-handed swords in general. It may simply just be my lack of experience. But we're going to see. Now, oh damn. Okay, something I did not notice is I've left this knife in the outlaw wagon for like 2 weeks and it's not rusted. So, a little bit of a shout out to Ugly Stick. They make a damn tough knife. Now I have two 2-liters. I'm going to cut one with each sword. By the way, these are Old Town beverages that you can pick up at your local Menards for like $1.11. 45 calories per serving, so they have a lot less calories than big name sodas. This is the lemon lime, the other one is the kick. Basically, Menards brand generic Mountain Dew and generic Sprite. Not bad. I'm currently working on the grape. They have Concord grape, a strawberry, and as I said, lemon lime and Mountain Dew. But we're going to see just how well each sword cuts these 2-liters. And I'm sorry about the sound there. And I'm going to kind of compare and contrast. It's good to have a sword that I can compare and contrast these. The good part about having a large collection is that if you have one of sort of similar profile to another, you can actually compare and contrast in reviews. Of course, it also makes the reviews longer because I don't know how to fucking edit. 3. I should also mention I'm changing up the order, using the saber first, then the Kriegsmesser. 2. 1. Ooh! Oh! That was nice. Oh, yep. Now, during that cut just now, I actually felt the blade twist. Not the blade, not that the sword bent or anything, but as I was cutting through the 2-liter, I felt the sword's edge alignment cut in like so, and then dip down suddenly. And it's reflected in the 2-liter half that I just cut. As we can see here, here's where I entered, and this is where I suddenly swooped down. And I felt it turn mostly in my index finger. Now we're going to get the other 2-liter. And compare the Kriegsmesser. Now, this time around, I'm going to only be using one hand to kind of make this comparison fair. But you can see that I'm much more comfortable with two-handed swords, especially when throwing a cut. But let's see. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, I felt nothing with that. The blade just shing! And that's the glory of a sharp blade. Is that it will generally go through bottles without any resistance. Now, I use the same edge alignment on both cuts. More or less, maybe a degree or two off. But we can obviously see that there's a difference in cutting angle, with this one having a much flatter, cleaner cut, and this one having a almost scooped cut. So sabers are definitely different beasts to the norm. Body armor. Now, up until now, you've only seen me do cuts downwards, and that's simply because my laptop's over there and I don't want to get soaked, so I haven't been doing the upwards cuts. Again, different setup, have to be more cautious of where the water goes because I'm using the microphone. I'm sacrificing basically being able to not care how I cut for better quality and more accurate testing. But if I stand over here, I should be able to do it. There's one thing. I definitely don't want this getting soaked. I plan on making a better scabbard for the Kriegsmesser later on. Just haven't had time. So, 3, 2, 1. Oh yeah. That was a very much scalloped cut. But the difference is, probably should show that. The difference is I didn't feel the blade scallop near as much in the upwards cut as I did with the downwards cut. Now, I know what you're going to say. Outlaw, it has a false edge, but you haven't cut much with the false edge. Last 2 bottles I'm cutting with the false edge. Also, this may be a good grip for doing false edge cuts if you choose to buy this sword. It combines a classic over the guard saber rapier grip style, but just using false edge. Also, something I'm really beginning to take note of is just the physical demands that this sword has. Like, it requires a lot of arm strength to use for long periods of time because you can't distribute the weight between your 2 hands like with a two-handed sword. You have to use this one-handed. You could try gripping it like this, but it's just stupid, and why would you even do this? Your entire left hand is exposed. So 3, 2, 1. I didn't so much as cut it as just pop the lid off. Try our old friend Dr. Pepper. Slightly narrower bottle. 3, 2, 1. There we go. You have to be very precise with this false edge because it's not a very large one. It only goes from where my fingers are to the tip. And even that isn't really true. It only really gets sharp up to here, from this point to the tip. Now, I know what you're going to say. Left-handed use. Well, as you know, I am a supporter of ambidextrous sword wielding. Basically, whatever cut you can perform with your right hand alone, you should be able to perform with your left hand. I am not very good at ambidextrous sword use. I mainly, if I'm using two swords, for example, I mainly just block with my right and attack with my left. But let's see how this works. 3. Put the right foot forward, damn it. 2, 1. Well, I cut into it, but nope. I was not expecting that. Well, my noble band of outlaws, I believe that is a sufficient video to say of the cutting ability of this sword. But I hear what you're saying. Outlaw, all you did was cut a few bottles. You didn't really demonstrate what the sword can really do. And I mean really do. The water on my mouse pad. And I hear you, my noble outlaws. The best part about this mic is I can walk off camera and get shit without having to worry about sound quality. That's why I have this. We are going to attempt to cut into this carpet roll. You gotta love working at a store that sells carpet and throws away perfectly good cutting targets. I'm going to cut this way simply because I don't want to risk breaking my stand. So 3, 2, 1. Made a decent way in before friction just stopped it. Still straight. Now, I would be amiss if I did not attempt to do the same with the Kriegsmesser. Of course, one-handed. Oh, my right arm's getting a workout today. Hold on. Let me just loosen up my right arm. There we go. So 3, 2, 1. I would say the Kriegsmesser, the cut the Kriegsmesser did, which is this one, it's not actually as deep as the saber's cut. And I believe that's because the saber has much more mass in its blade. But let's just, for the sake of argument, see what I can do with it freestanding and then a quick two-handed cut. So as we can see, the Kriegsmesser, still straight by the way, with its second cut, made it almost equivalently as deep into the carpet roll as the saber. Now, it should be mentioned that the saber and the Kriegsmesser are generally two different swords for two different purposes. This sword was created to fight people in gambeson, thick linen cloth armor. So it has much more of a slicing profile. It needs to have a thin, wide, acutely sharpened blade to slice through the layers of gambeson to get to the flesh underneath. However, the 1796 light cavalry saber, on the other hand, this sword was designed to fight people in much sturdier cotton burlap armor or uniforms. Much sturdier cotton, thicker, well, not so much thicker, but cotton by its very nature is stronger than linen, because the standard thickness of cotton in the 18th century was about 3 or 4 layers worth of linen. So this sword was made to cut through thicker material, was made to cut through stronger material. You also had to contend with horses, more. Cavalry battles in the 18th century were a large part of warfare. You wouldn't really find any kind of major, you wouldn't go to a battlefield in the 18th century and not seen a cavalry charge at some point. Shock cavalry, cavalry as a main fighting force, etc., etc. And this sword was designed to be used from horseback to sweep past your enemy and cut through them in one go. Hence its thicker, more stout blade. And its design is more facilitated for a chop rather than a slice like the Kriegsmesser. Designed to slice through thinner, weaker cloth to get the flesh, designed to basically chop through thicker, heavier cloth to get the flesh. Also designed to basically chop through a man's rib cage. As I said in the unboxing video, this was basically by basically by borrowing the trench sweepers reason that I'm just going to say it. The reason the Nazis in the 1940s, and I don't fucking care if anyone has a shit over me saying Nazi, it's politically correct to call the German Discaffer Nazis. But the Nazis in World War II tried to claim that the trench sweeper shotgun was committing war crimes. Well, you guys invented mustard gas. We're using a gun whose only rate of fire is the backed upness of our hormonally driven adolescent army. I think we have a valid case to prove using a shotgun is not war crimes. But Germany still bitched about it. Or the Nazis still bitched about it. Germany as a whole. What people don't seem to understand is when you're talking about 1940s Germany, there are Germans and then there are Nazis. The Nazis were the enemies complaining about the shotguns. The Germans were the ones forced to go along with Nazi propaganda because Nazis basically ruled Germany at the time. That's what a lot of people don't really want to admit, is that not all Germans were Nazis in World War II. There were actually a lot of Germans against Hitler and everything, but they stayed silent to protect themselves, or they acted in secret. But as I was saying, this, by using the trench sweeper's definition, was a sword that committed war crimes against the French. And, well, French bitch about shit more than Nazis do. But in any case, basically the story goes that the French army was complaining about the British using these weapons, saying that they were too brutal, because there were accounts of British soldiers being able to lop off enemies' whole limbs, being able to cut through their legs, cut through their arms in one swing, and even cut open a man's rib cage. This could do the same thing, but it's not optimized for it. This is optimized to butcher a human. This is optimized, well, to kill in a less gruesome manner, I suppose. They're both choppy, slashy things. It's just this one's more choppy, this one's more slicey. And somewhere along this line, I just went into a fucking rant. But in conclusion, finally getting to the damn conclusion, look forward to the review of this sword, because I have a lot of interesting things to say about it. So until next time, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai tells all y'all, be crazy rednecks, be safe in using your weapons, and I'm out. Peace. And as I normally do, there will be a secondary cutting video with this thing once it's sharpened. And I may just use my normal filming method of phone and tripod, just because I don't have to worry so much about water going everywhere. I'm out. Peace. If I can find that damn. There it is.